Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Let me say something plainly before we go anywhere else today. The reason most people cannot find peace is not because life is too hard. It is because they are living inside a system designed to keep them restless. And I do not mean that in some vague poetic sense. I mean it literally. The grind culture, the Roman calendar, the Sunday circus, the prosperity gospel, the social media algorithm, like every piece of that system just runs on one fuel: your inability to be still. A person who can govern themselves internally cannot be easily sold, cannot be easily controlled, cannot be easily manipulated into staying in the back seat of a car being driven off a cliff. So the system keeps you moving and keeps you distracted and keeps the cups full and overflowing, so you never have enough inner stillness to ask the question that would unravel everything. Why am I so exhausted and still so empty? Well, Yeshua knew this. Matthew 15 from 18 to 19. But the things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and those things make the man unholy. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. Out of the heart, not out of the economy, not out of your circumstances, not out of your, not out of whoever wronged you last week, truly, but just out of the heart. Which means the war, the real war, has always been internal. And the exodus to peace begins not by changing your external circumstances, but by being honest enough to look at what is happening inside of you. Stop running, turn inward, do the work. Now let me show you exactly what is happening inside most people right now. The soul is like a chariot, and it's being pulled by two horses. All right? One horse is noble. It pulls towards discipline, integrity, reason, long-term thinking. It whispers, do the hard thing. Build something real. Be patient. The other horse is wild, and it pulls towards impulse, comfort, distraction, immediate relief. It demands feel better now, react now, escape now. And the charioteer, the one who is supposed to be steering, well, that is you. And most of the time, you are not holding the reins. See, the algorithm pulls you, the emotion pull you, old wounds pull you, fear pull you, and after long enough living reactively, people mistake their reactions for their identity. Reaction is not identity, but no one really tells you that. Some of you want confidence, but shrink every time that you are truly seen. Some of you want genuine connection, but the moment someone gets close to you, you manufacture a reason to just push them away. Some of you feel a pull towards something more, but you spend your hours just numbing the very thoughts that would lead you there. That is not weakness. That is the two horses pulling in the opposite direction, while the charioteer has dropped the reins and is just along for the ride. The noble horse is not asking you to be a machine. The wild horse is not simply evil. It is often wounded and afraid and conditioned by years of pain. The work is not destroying one side. The work is learning to steer both. And that work starts by understanding why the cups keep overflowing. Here's the picture. Every unprocessed wound, every swallowed disappointment, every betrayal you buried underneath busyness, imagine it being poured into a cup. And that cup fills another cup. And that fills another, layer by layer, a pyramid of unprocessed pain. And the person thinks that they are fine, and they're still functioning, and they're still showing up, and they're still smiling. But eventually, the top cup fills And when it overflows, they blame the moment in front of them, the relationship, the coworker, the comment, the inconvenience. But the overflow did not begin today. It began years ago in rooms nobody else saw, in wounds nobody else was told about, and silent agreements made after seasons of pain. And that is why a small criticism can create a massive reaction, and why someone sabotages the healthiest relationships that they've ever had, and why anger arrives larger than the situation warrants. The present moment is the only trigger. The deeper issue was always overflowing underneath. The first strategic move towards peace is this: stop adding to the pyramid and start emptying the cups. That means sitting with what you have been running from, so grieving honestly and confronting patterns instead of just changing environments, because if you never empty the cups, you will carry the same overflow into every new season, every new relationship, every new beginning. And here is the spiritual reality underneath it all. People say that they want to hear from Yahweh while surrounding themselves with constant mental static. But clarity does not come from noise. Well, look at 1 Kings 19, verse 11 to 12. A great and mighty wind tore the mountains apart and shattered rocks before Yahweh, but Yahweh was not in the wind, and after the wind there was an earthquake. But Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but Yahweh was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was just a still small voice, right? A still small voice. Well, not every loud thought deserves authority, and not every emotion deserves obedience, and not every outside voice deserves space in your mind. Well, peace begins when you become quiet enough to hear what has been buried underneath the noise all along. Now, before I show you the fence up, I need to show you what Ezekiel saw when Yahweh lifted him outside of the system and gave him a clear view of what was happening inside it. Ezekiel was a priest by birth, and he was supposed to serve in the beautiful temple in Jerusalem. And that was his expected life, his comfortable path, his religious inheritance. Instead, Yahweh just stepped him over the fence of his expected life and just placed him in the middle of pagan Babylon, outside in exile, and in the place nobody wanted to be. And from that outside position, Yahweh just showed him something that should stop every person in every religious building in their tracks. So, Ezekiel 8 verse 16, he brought me into the inner court of the house of Yahweh, and there at the entrance to the temple of Yahweh, between the porch and the altar, there were about 25 men, with their backs towards the temple of Yahweh and their faces towards the east. And they were bowing down toward the sun in the east. So please listen carefully. These were not random pagans on the streets. These were religious leaders, okay? They were standing in the most sacred spot in the entire temple, between the porch and the altar, the holiest ground in the nation. And their backs were towards the temple of Yahweh, and their faces were towards the east, towards the sun, okay? They were bowing to the sun while standing in the house of God, who made the sun. And Yahweh called it an abomination. And before that, in verse 14, Ezekiel saw women sitting inside the temple courts, weeping for Tammuz, the Babylonian dying and rising god. Well, the same God whose name sits on the 4th month of the post-exile Jewish calendar to this day, and in the same God whose symbol is the Tau, or the letter T, which became the cross on the front of every church building after Constantine merged the faith with the pagan infrastructure of Rome. The abomination Ezekiel saw on the temple is the abomination we see on the stage today. Their backs towards the word, their faces towards the sun, the mark of Tammuz on the wall, the performance designed to produce an emotional atmosphere, the calendar running on Babylonian names and Roman festivals, right? Ezekiel saw it from the outside because that's where Yahweh placed him, outside the comfortable system, so he could see what those inside could not see. And that's why this ministry exists from the outside. Because you cannot see clearly from the inside the building with your back to the temple. And here is the responsibility of the watchman that Ezekiel was given. Ezekiel 3 verse 17. Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, warn them from me. If the watchman sees the danger and stays silent, the blood of the people is on the watchman's hand. Silence is not an option. Now let me show you why the internal storm is being sustained by external choices. You cannot find the seventh day rest while living on a Roman calendar, and you cannot hear the still small voice while fueling your life on the pharmakia of grind culture, and you cannot empty the cups while spending every Shabbat in a circus designed to keep them full. Like, you have to hop the fence. Revelation 18 verse 4 says, come out from my people, so that you will not participate in her sins, and that you will not receive her plagues. Like, come out. Not reform her from the inside, not find a more comfortable seat in the same broken system. Come out. And here is why rest is not optional. It is strategic. Leaders who have carried enormous weight across human history understood one thing, that the grind culture refuses to admit. An exhausted mind makes poor decisions. Churchill understood this during the Second World War. While managing the most catastrophic military conflict in human history, he napped deliberately every afternoon. Not because he was weak, but because he understood that clarity under pressure requires recovery, and that the quality of his judgment in the evening depended on what he did at midday. There's Elon Musk, who has said publicly that his biggest mistakes were made when he was sleep deprived. The most pressure environments in the world, military strategy, elite athletes, like they all just build rest into like protocol because exhaustion is a tactical liability, right? Even surgeons, right? Like the enemy knows this too. So an exhausted person is easier to provoke, easier to manipulate, easier to just keep passive in the back seat while the car is just heading directly towards a cliff. This is exactly why Shabbat is not a nice tradition for religious people, right? It is a strategic interpretation of the system designed to keep you depleted. Like, one day per week where you just stop being a producer and remember that Yahweh is your source. So Ezekiel 20 verse 12 would say, I also gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart. A sign, not just a rest day, a covenant declaration. You must keep the seventh day. You are planting a flag over your life that says, well, I'm not a product of the empire. My worth is not measured by my output. Yahweh is my source. So do your best to prepare a day ahead on day 6. You plan your meals, prepare your heart if you can, forgive before the sun goes down, and just come into the Shabbat clean if you can. Because if you enter the 7th day still carrying the fight from the 6th, then you are still working, like, and the cups, they never get emptied. So come into rest like you are entering a palace, because that is exactly what you are doing. Okay? Now let me show you a picture that explains exactly why some people just leave the system before the rest of the flock does, and why that is not rebellion, and it's an assignment, actually. So Jeremiah 50 verse 6. My people have been lost sheep. Their shepherds have led them astray and caused them to roam on the mountains, and they wandered from mountain to hill. They forgot their own resting place. Well, the shepherds led them into the mountains, into complicated religious systems, into Babylonian calendar names, into stages with sun symbols and on the backdrop, and then into tithe structures that fund the circus instead of feeding the actual poor. And the sheep forget their way like they forget where home was, and they forgot the Shabbat, and they forgot the appointed times, and they forgot the ancient path. And Yahweh's response to that is Jeremiah 50 verse 8. Move out of the midst of Babylon and be as the he-goats before the flocks. The he-goats before the flocks, okay? In the ancient shepherd world, the he-goats were the ones who just went first. When the shepherd needed to lead the flock to new ground, to better grass, to cleaner water, to a safer field, he sent his he-goats across the bridge first. Not because the he-goats were like superior to the rest of the flock, but because they were the ones bold enough to move before the others. And when the flock watched the he-goats cross over and did not die, when they saw it eating good grass on the other side, they just started to follow. One goes first, and then the others, they come. That is just the pattern Yahweh uses. Okay? Not mass movements, not institutional announcements, not denominational agreements. One person who trusts the shepherd enough to go first while everyone is still standing on the dead brown grass, calling it normal. And sometimes that one person was rejected by the system. Sometimes the flock wanted nothing to do with them. Sometimes the denomination called them troublemakers. Sometimes the religious community labeled them a legalist or a rebel or someone who went too far. Sometimes they said they were prideful, ignorant, deceived, unstable, dangerous, for questioning what everyone else had accepted as normal. Sometimes they mocked them for being too intense, too serious, too zealous, too unwilling to compromise. But the shepherd knew which lamb he could send. The one he raised himself. The one who knew his heartbeat from the closeness and not from distance. The one who trusted his voice enough to hop the fence before the rest of the flock gave permission. And I feel like that's what this ministry is. We hop the fence. We are following the way. We are standing on the other side of the bridge telling you, well, the grass is real. And the shepherd prepared this side, so, come over. And if you have a problem with that, again, that's just between you and Yahweh, because we're just following his blueprint here. Now, let me just say something about the peace industry. The peace industry. They want to sell you silence packaged in an app, charge you monthly for guided meditations and breathing exercises and 3-minute practices designed by somebody who read a book about stillness but never actually really practiced it. That is just another product, okay? And you do not need that. You do not need another app. You do not need a guided voice whispering instructions at you. You do not need a premium subscription to find your own heart. What you really need is just to be still. Go sit underneath a tree. Sit quietly in your car before you walk inside, right? Just lay in your bed before you reach the phone. Just sit anywhere. The access to Yahweh is free. You can even go in your room and close the door. Make your request be known. Like the gate is already open. Yahweh does not take from you. People take from you. Yahweh gives to you. And if Yahweh removes something from your hands, it's only because he can see that what he is about to give you requires your hands to be open. Now, some of you have tried sitting in silence, and the moment the noise stopped, like just every unpaid bill or the worst case scenario rushed in to fill the space. And that is because you were trying to empty your mind. An empty mind is a vulnerable mind, okay? This is where biblical meditation, Hagah, changes everything. So in Hebrew, Hagah means to mutter, to moan, low, to growl. It's like a lion over its prey. Like a cow chewing its cud. The cow chews, swallows, brings it back up, and chews again until every ounce of nutrients has been extracted. That is what you do with one piece of Yahweh's truth. You do not need a whole chapter. You don't need one verse, one phrase, one solid anchor, right? and you chew on it all day, and you say it out loud, you turn it over, you take it apart and ask what it means for your specific situation right now. So, Psalm 1, verse 2 to 3, but his delight is in the Torah of Yahweh, and on his Torah he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water that yield its fruit in season, and its leaf does not wither, and whatever he does prospers. Day and night, right? Constant, low, steady, chewing on the word until it becomes part of how you think, how you see, and how you respond. And when you fill your mind with the word, you are not fighting your thoughts. You're outnumbering them. You're turning the lights on. An occupied mind under Hagah is hard to rattle because when the storm comes, there is already something solid inside, something anchored, something the storm cannot uproot. That is free. Free. That has always been free. And it is more powerful than anything they are trying to sell you out there. Now, I need to say something direct, because too many people are reaching for a shortcut that is making things worse, and some of you have been using perhaps marijuana, maybe alcohol, whatever the substance is, to quiet the internal noise. You call it relaxing, you say it helps you decompress. Well, just let me show you what is actually happening here, okay? When you use substance to quiet the mind, you are not finding peace. You are dropping the guard, truly. You think the gate closed? The gate is wide open. And when that gate goes down, disordered thoughts rush in like a flood, chaotic, uninvited, like leaving your front gate open to a wild animal. Now you're trapped inside while it just tears through everything. That is not rest. That is a crisis that you invited. The world confuses numbness with peace, but they are completely different things. Numbness just says, I cannot feel the storm, but peace says, I can stand in the storm. So true peace comes from a guarded mind, a mind you have tended intentionally through prayer and through Hagah, through Shabbat, through honest self-examination. And there is a deep, unshakable confidence that comes from sitting in a yard you have personally tended, okay? A yard where nothing enters without your own permission, a yard where the gates are locked and the watchman is sober on post, okay? Do not trade that authority for a chemical haze. Please guard your gates, because you cannot cultivate a garden of peace while the fence is down for any wild thing to walk through. Now let me tell you about something that most people were never told, okay? Yeshua wore fringes on the corner of his garments. I know I mentioned this a lot, but I just want to get it out there. The disciples wore them. Paul wore them. I wear them. The women who was healed in Mark 5 did not reach for the hem of a robe. She reached for the fringes, the physical covenant reminder hanging from the hem of the Messiah. And there is a reason Yahweh commanded them. Numbers 15, verse 39, it will be a tassel for you to look at, and you will remember all the commands of Yahweh and obey them, and not follow after your own heart and your own eyes, which leads you to chase after many things, which is fairly true. Okay? You look at them, you remember, do not follow after your own heart and your own eyes. That is it's a guardrail, like a physical, visible, wearable reminder of covenant in moments when the wild horse is just pulling and the still small voice is far too hard to hear. It's a reminder that says, you are not your impulse. You are not your worst moment. You are a person under covenant with the living God, so act like it. Now contrast that with the Tau on the stage, the letter T, the mark of Tammuz, like the symbol that did not appear among the followers of Yeshua for the first 300 years of the way. The cross is a decoration. It provides no guardrail. It does not pull you back when you are about to lose your integrity. or compromise or covenant. The Frenches are all for all followers of the way, men and women. Every citizen of the kingdom is responsible for guarding their own gates. Luke 16, verse 10. He who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much. Start with the small thing. Let Yahweh see what you do with the small assignments before he just hands you the larger ones, all right? Now, I just want to show you what they look like, okay? They look like these. Now, let me talk about the temple you are carrying around, okay? 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, that you are not your own? For you were bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body. You are a temple. And Leviticus 11 is the maintenance manual. You are not, like, you would not let a stranger walk through your house dragging dirt across every surface, right? So why would you want to drop what Yahweh called unclean into the body, where his spirit dwells? That is not legalism. That is stewardship. Like, every time you check what goes into the temple, whether it's food, whether it's substance, whether it is what you watch or like what you listen to, you are building the exact same muscle that you will need to check what goes into your theology, your relationships, your decisions, and so on and so forth. The separation muscle is universal. You build it in the kitchen and it just shows up everywhere else. Like, for example, finances, or coming out of sin, or coming out of Babylon. Truly. And Friday management, day 6, the preparation day, is where this becomes tactical. If you cannot plan your meals before Shabbat, you will be scrambling when the sun goes down. And if you cannot organize your day 6, you will spend the 7th day just managing chaos instead of just entering rest. Believe me with that one. I mean, it's happened to me. Just gotta let you know about that. The discipline of preparation, okay, that is an act of worship, because it says, well, I take the appointed time seriously enough to be ready for it, right? Which we all should. And that seriousness, that just proves that we are ready for the next level, right? Yahweh does not just hand the keys of a kingdom to someone who cannot manage their day 6, right? Now, let me expose something that the system has been using to control people for 1,700 years. You might know it. I'm pretty sure you all do. The biblical tithe was never a monetary tithe, okay? Let me say that again, plainly, because most people have never heard it stated this directly, okay? The biblical tithe was agricultural, grain, fruit, livestock, the produce of the land. That was the tithe, period. So Deuteronomy 14 from 22 to 23, you are to tithe all the produce of what you plant, what the field produces year by year, so that you may learn to fear Yahweh your God always, right? The produce, what the field produces, not your wage, not your income, not your paycheck deposited into an institution's bank account. No. There is not one tithe in Torah. There's actually 3. And once you understand what they actually are, the modern church version looks nothing like what Yahweh actually commanded all of us. So, the first tithe is the Levitical tithe. This went to the Levites because the Levites had no land inheritance. Every other tribe received territory in the land of Israel and could farm it, but Levites were just set apart full time for the service of the tabernacles and the temple. So the other tribes, they brought agricultural produce to sustain them, not money, produce. The second tithe is just the festival tithe. This is the one nobody will ever tell you about, but I will. So the festival tithe was kept by the family itself to fund their travel and their meals at the appointed times of Yahweh. So Leviticus 23. So you saved it and used it when you went up to Jerusalem for like Passover, right? Or Pentecost, which is coming up on May 24th, and Tabernacles. look at what the Torah actually says about it. Okay, so Deuteronomy 14 from 25 to 26. Exchange it for silver and take the silver in hand and go to the place Yahweh your God chooses. Spend the silver on whatever you desire. Cattle, sheep, wine, beer, or anything else that your being craves. Eat there before Yahweh your God and rejoice. Spend it on whatever your soul desires, like eat there before Yahweh and rejoice, okay? Mind you, it's within boundaries, so just make sure you keep Leviticus 11. The Father designed a tithe where you eat and celebrate and is at his appointed times. The system flipped that into 10% of your paycheck, like going to a building fund so that the ringmaster there can keep the lights on the stage. Well, that is not the Torah. That is Babylon dressed in Torah language. The third tithe is the poor tithe. Okay, every third year, this tithe was stored locally in your own community to feed the Levite, the foreigner, the orphan, the widow in your neighborhood. Right? Not a central institution. Not filtered through an administrative hierarchy locally directly to the people in your community who had absolutely nothing. Now look at what none of these tithes have in common with what the modern church does. None of them are 10% of your paycheck going into a building fund to pay for a celebrity pastor's salary and a stage production and an Easter egg hunt, and well, that honors the birthday of some fertility goddess. You know, the Queen of Heaven over there. Yeshua acknowledged the Pharisees' meticulous tithing of garden herbs and just said in Matthew 23, verse 23, "Woe to you, Torah scholars and Pharisees, hypocrites! You tithe mint and dill and cumin, yet you have neglected the weightier matter of Torah, justice, mercy, faithfulness." He did not say the tithe was wrong. He just said that you cannot use religious tithing as a substitute for justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Like you cannot hand over 10% and just think that you have fulfilled the Father's heart. Now, Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7, "Let each person give as he has decided in his heart, not out of grief or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver." As he has decided in his heart, not under compulsion. Right? Not because the pastor told you the spirit of mammon will get at you if you don't give 10% of your income to their institution. And I need to say this plainly. If the pastor actually does tell you that the spirit of mammon will get to you if you don't give 10%, that is manipulation. Watch out for that. That is not the Father's voice. That is a troll under the bridge keeping you on the dead brown grass over there. Moving along. Let me say something personal before I show you what giving looks like on the other side of the fence over here, okay? First of all, I do not want any of your money. I never have. I've never asked for it, and I never will with this ministry. I don't want it. Okay? Well, I'm a firm believer of Matthew 10, verse 8 for this ministry. Freely you have received, freely give. Right? That is the operating principle here. The word was given freely. Pass it on the same way. Now let me show you a picture from Scripture that exposes what is actually happening in most religious institutions today. In John 12, a woman poured expensive perfume on Yeshua's feet, and Judas, well, he just stood there and he complained, "Why wasn't this sold and the money given to the poor?" Right? And John 12, verse 6, now he said this, it was not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief and he had the money box and he just used to steal what was put in it, right? Well, Judas did not care about the poor. He just cared about the money box. And today you can see that same spirit in ministry after ministry, online platforms, pleading, donate to this ministry and support your work. But who are they actually helping, right? Most of the time they're just helping themselves to your resources to fund their own lifestyle and their next pagan festival production, perhaps. They are not in the trenches with the widow. They are not sitting with the orphan. They are managing the money box, okay? Take away the money, we'll see who stays, right? We'll see. Like, being called is just the invitation. Being chosen is really the response. And the chosen ones, the real ones, the ones with the genuine soft soil in their hearts, they do not need a donor wall or a tax deduction or a social media announcement to give. Now, let me also say something about tax write-offs, because this has to be named. Stop using people as tax deductions. Just gotta say, when somebody says they are giving to the children or donating to the youth, but the primary motivation is reducing their own tax bill, that is not giving. That is investing in yourself through a different account. Matthew 6, verse 3 to 4. But when you give, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. When you give in secret, where there is no receipt, no paperwork, no tax benefit, that is where the Father's blessing lives. And here is something about timing. Why wait for a holiday that belongs to a calendar of compulsion? Like, why tie your generosity to the pagan season the system has scheduled it for? Like, give on a random third day. Like, give when it is not expected. Like, give when nobody sees it coming. That surprise, that genuine act of love, disconnect from any religious obligation, will show that your care is consistent and not seasonal. Think about what redirected generosity could actually accomplish. When Notre Dame Cathedral caught fire in 2019, within days, nearly $1 billion was raised for a building from 340,000 donors across 150 countries. You know, if we can do that for stone, why are there still poor people in our neighborhoods? If we can mobilize that kind of resource for an institution, we can mobilize it for the widow standing right in front of us, or so on and so forth. Like, the money exists and is just trapped inside systems that use it to maintain themselves. Give the widow 100% of what you intended for her, instead of handing 10% to a machine and hoping 30% eventually reaches someone in need after the overhead. Give directly, give quietly, give cheerfully, give as you have decided in your own heart. Now, let me name something that most people never put words to, okay? Inner vows. Inner vows. So a person gets betrayed and silently says, I have never trusted. I'll never trust again, okay? They might say, I will never trust again. A person gets rejected and says, I will never let anyone truly see me. A person gets disappointed so many times, they stop hoping, and then they just call that wisdom. They just call that wisdom for some reason. A person gets hurt enough times that they quietly vow, hope only leads to pain. I would rather stay guarded and bitter than risk being hurt again, right? These vows are not spoken out loud, but they govern behavior for many years, and they filter every new relationship, every new season, every open door through the lens of the wound that formed them. When you point it out, their response is often, well, I don't have any inner vows. That is not me. But even that is an inner vow. I refuse to look within. Okay? Every person carries internal patterns, some healthy, some destructive. The goal is not self-condemnation. The goal is honesty. Honesty before Yahweh. And honesty with yourself. Because if there is no peace within, if those vows and wounds and overcrowded cups are never addressed, then you become like an ocean that is tossed by every wind. Like, one moment you're calm, and the next you're derailed by something that you can't even fully explain. So truly, peace be still. That is not only a picture of the sea, right? That is a picture of the human soul. Yeshua did not negotiate with the storm. He spoke to it and obeyed. Well, it obeyed, basically. And that same authority is available to the soul that is in right alignment. But you cannot speak peace over your internal storm while feeding the things that sustain it. The exodus to peace is not just leaving Egypt, it's not going back. So, in the ancient world, a disciple followed their rabbi so closely that by the end of the day, they were covered in the dust kicked up by the rabbi's sandals. That the measure of, well, that was the measure of discipleship. Like, not how much you knew and not how impressive your theology was, but really how close you are walking, right? Like, you should not just be learning about Yeshua. You should be so close that you wear what he wore, or ate what he ate, or rest on the day that he rested, or show up to the appointments that he kept, and give the way he gave, directly, quietly, without a stage, without some tax receipt, without a donor wall. And here is the warning directly connected to that proximity. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name and drive out demons in your name and perform many miracles in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Get away from me, you worker of lawlessness. Worker of lawlessness, okay? Without Torah, right? Without Father's instructions. These are not obvious sinners. These are religious performers. People who use the name of Yeshua publicly, loudly, impressively, while walking in the system's direction, while keeping the Roman calendar, while celebrating the Babylonian counterfeits, while ignoring the seventh day, while offering strange fire on dates the king never set, man. He does not know them. It's not because they were terrible people, but because they were never on the same road as him. See, the Hebrew understanding to know someone is to share a walk with them. It is intimacy built through proximity and shared direction. And you will not hear those words if you're walking where he's walking. And he walks the seventh day, not the first. He walks the appointed times, not the counterfeits. He walks in the direct giving to the widow, to the stranger, not into the institutional money boxes. He walks in the ancient paths. The clean food, the covenant fringes, the honest heart, the unmixing offering. Please get close enough that his dust truly gets on you. That is the goal, not theology about Yeshua, proximity to Yeshua. Now let me give you something to actually use, because at the end of every week, not as condemnation, as a compass, please ask yourself, which actions this week were aligned with my vision? Where did I drift or waste energy on things outside of my control? What one thing, if done consistently, would most improve next week and every day? As a moment of honest self-governance, ask yourself, did I guard my mind today? Did I move my body today? Did I eat clean today? Did I build my craft today? Did I align with Yahweh today? Did I pray today? Did I sit in stillness today? Did I protect my sleep? Did I govern myself before trying to influence another person? Did I endure criticism without collapse? Did I endure temptation without surrender? Or did I endure praise without pride? Like, where did you win today? Name three things. And where did you drift today? Name three things. And what will you fix tomorrow? If you could, name three things. No shame, just correction. Because if you rock too far to one side, you will fall in the water. So small adjustments, and you shall stay balanced. It's basic seamanship. So tomorrow, just lean the other way. Every moment of every day, you stand at some crossroads, right? And every crossroads you choose is either convenience or covenant. Choose covenant. When you wake up tomorrow, before the phone, before the noise, sit 15 minutes in silence if you can. Not with a guided voice, okay? Not with anything in the background, just you in the stillness, right? If you pray, pray. But just start with the silence. Just breathe for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Release for 4 counts. 5 minutes. Consider Hagah if you can. Then just move your body. Just go for a walk. Lift something. The fog in your mind often clears when your body starts moving, right? If you wake up early enough, the sun will be rising by the time you finish. It's beautiful. Lamentations 3:22-23. Because of the mercies of Yahweh are not consumed, for his compassions do not fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. New every morning. After the silence, after the breath and the movement, take one verse. Chew on it, right? Let the Hagah do its work throughout the day. Build peace like the skill that it actually is. It is forged. It's not found. Now let me bring this all together, all right? The reason you cannot find peace, perhaps, is not because peace does not exist. It is because peace requires an exodus. And most people are still sitting in the back seat hoping that the driver will turn around. The driver is not turning around. Jump out, do a roll, make a run for it, get out of Dodge. Here's a full picture of what you are leaving. The grind culture that tells you rest is weakness, while Churchill and every serious leader in history knew that exhaustion, like an exhausted mind, loses. The Roman calendar, with the names of false gods on every day of the week, the Sunday circus with a Tao of Tam on there, and the backs of the leaders turned to the temple while their faces point east, and the prosperity gospel using a distorted tithe to fund some Babylonian festival while the widow in your neighborhood goes without anything. The Judas spirit money box that manages donor resources for institutional survival instead of reaching the actual poor. The pharmakia chemical and religious that just keeps your gates open and your mind clouded, and the 45,000 denominations that all agree on one thing: the Torah is done away with, well, except the monetary tithe they collect on Rome's schedule. So just come out of all of it, right? And here's what you're walking into. 7th day, Shabbat, where Yahweh rests with you and just calls it a sign. The appointed times of Leviticus 23, where the king says, I am standing here, come meet with me. The Hagah, right? Where one piece of truth becomes an anchor that holds through every storm. And the guarded gates, where your mind is tended and nothing enters without your permission. The fringes, where the covenant is visible on your body as a daily guardrail against the impulse. The direct giving, quiet and secret between you and the Father and the person that is in need. Where the widow gets the full gift with zero overhead. The random third day generosity that has nothing to do with a pagan calendar and everything to do with the heart that is alive. A clean temple where you eat what honors the Spirit who dwells inside you. And the he-goat obedience, where you go first and the flock follows. And the watchman's post, where you see clearly from the outside and blow the trumpet even when no one wants to hear it. At the center of all of it, the ancient path. The path where Yeshua is actually walking. Close enough that his dust gets all over you. Jeremiah 6:16, thus says Yahweh, stand at the crossroads and look, ask for the ancient path. Where is the good way? Then walk in it. You will find rest for your souls. Walk in it, and you will find rest. So today, not when circumstances cooperate, not when everyone around you finally understands, today, pick up the reins, empty your cup. Sit in the stillness long enough to hear the still small voice. And keep the 7th day. Like today. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Wear the reminder of covenant. Guard your gates. And chew the word until it changes you. And clean the temple in the small things. so Yahweh can trust you with the larger ones. Give directly, give quietly. Give on a random 3rd day, 4th day, 5th day, right? With no receipt and no announcement. Be the he-goats that go first. And walk so close to Yeshua that you come home covered in his dust. The exodus to peace does not begin when everything is perfect. It begins with one step off the paved road onto the ancient path. Now, one last thing that I want to mention, okay? In Ezekiel 8, the Father takes the prophet on a tour of the temple, right? Again, to show him the glory was departing. And he shows him people weeping for Tam, right? And the worshiping the sun, again. And bringing the Babylonian mystery religions right into the holy place, just as I'm seeing now. The people back then, they probably thought it was like harmless or just like a nice tradition, but God called that an abomination. With the issue with Mother's Day and Father's Day, since Mother's Day is coming up, isn't just that they are secular, it is that they are the modern skin on a very old pagan bones. Okay? The Mother's Day is an ancient, form, in its ancient form, was often tied to worship of the Queen of Heaven, again. These festivals involved fertility rituals and sexual acts that were meant to energize the land. Jeremiah also dealt with this in Jeremiah 44. The people refused to stop making cakes for the Queen of Heaven, hot crust buns, claiming it brought them prosperity. The church does the same thing today. They prioritize the prosperity of social harmony and nice feelings over the strict separation God commanded. The Torah is very clear in Leviticus 10 verse 10. The priests must distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean. So when a church puts a Mother's Day special, instead of focusing on the appointed times of Yahweh, they are bringing strange fire into the temple, and remember what happened to Aaron's sons. So just as the elders in Ezekiel's day turned their backs on the altar to face the sun, modern churches turn their backs on the feast of the Lord, or Yahweh, essentially, to face the holidays of Babylon. The Father, he does not want his bride sharing her affection with these old fertility spirits. If he wanted a day to honor mothers and fathers, well, he already gave us the 5th commandment as a lifestyle, not a Babylonian-rooted ritual once a year. So please do not be drunk on the wine of Babylon, to the point that you can't even see the difference between a holy convocation and a pagan ritual. And truly, peace is not passive. Peace is built through awareness, through surrender, through honesty, through discipline. It is forged, not found accidentally. Life may never become easier, truly, but you can become steadier and clearer and less ruled by chaos and more capable of just carrying weight without breaking. Not stone, not cold, not numb, unshakable, okay? Without losing your humanity. So walk it, honor it, live it, be great. With that being said, y'all can go in peace, and peace be with you. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.